many gods enough to stand against the power of one epic Norse god? Apparently not. At least not in terms of what we saw unfold in the pages of DC vs. Marvel. DC vs. Marvel came out at a time when the comics industry was struggling. To encourage sales, the two biggest comic book publishing competitors of DC and Marvel decided to team up and let their characters duke it out in the pages of this comic. This collaborative project allowed us to see characters like Thor and Shazam, or as he was known then, Captain Marvel, face one another and also of course see who comes out on top between them. When it came to this pairing, it turned out that Thor was ultimately the victor between the two once the secret of Billy's transformation into Captain Marvel was revealed. Sorry, Billy. What are some gods that you would like to see Thor face? Let me know down in the comments. And do you think he'd win? I don't know. Let us know. Thor and Hulk is like a mashup for the ages. We've seen these two go toe to toe more times than I can honestly count. And while I'd say that most of the time I've actually seen Hulk win between these two, this isn't always the case. In fact, in Thor Ragnarok, the only reason that Hulk even wins that fight is because the Grand Master interferes and shocks Thor into submission after he discovers he can tap into his lightning powers even without Mjolnir in hand. In the comics, Thor has beaten Hulk not by channeling his inherent powers himself, but actually through the use of Mjolnir. With one swift hit from the hammer, Thor was able to knock out Hulk and claim victory. At least, you know, that one time. At one point, Thor is manipulated into working for the Führer, the leader of Germany during World War II. He is an amazing asset, obviously, for Germany to have on their side, clearly, and ends up proving himself so when he goes up against the Invaders in Invaders issue number 33. At the behest of the Führer, he is sent out to take out Joseph Stalin, but ends up instead handily knocking out Union Jack, who was disguised as Stalin at the time, prepared to be eliminated, I imagine, if need be, in his place. All for, you know, world peace, I guess. All for the side of the Allies. Fortunately, it is in this battle that Thor realizes the villainous nature of the man he is working for and ends up being able to use Mjolnir to withdraw the damage he has done and bring Union Jack back to life. Thank goodness. I'm so glad that Thor realized he was on the evil side of that war. Union Jack in this iteration is Brian Falsworth. Brian was serving back in World War II and started out as a spy working alongside his friend Roger Aubrey before he inevitably ended up as a superhero working as a member of the Invaders hero team. He is a super soldier, though not as strong or as experienced, I would say, as Captain America. He doesn't get to live nearly as long as Cap does either. He's got a much shorter time in the comics. Deadpool used to love dressing up as Thor, but while people say imitation is the best form of flattery, let's keep in mind that that's a Midgardian saying and not an Asgardian one. I don't even know Asgardian sayings or idioms. Eternal life is like an apple, is that one of them? That should be one of them because it's kind of true. So of course when Thor came across Deadpool impersonating him, he was not too pleased. And look, Deadpool is a pretty gifted fighter and also has that healing factor on lock, but he's not nearly as powerful as Thor is, let's be honest. Not by a long shot. So of course, no one was surprised when Thor made quick work of Deadpool with his hammer Mjolnir. Namor is more of an anti-hero than a full-on superhero, I will grant you that. But I doubt we're going to be doing any top 10 times Thor humbled anti-heroes lists anytime soon, so I'm just going to seize the opportunity to focus on the hero part of anti-hero and feature Namor here. Namor and Thor have fought on a few different occasions, and of those fights that I'm aware of, it was a pretty brief and painful experience for Namor. Namor is usually known for being an underappreciated heavy hitter in the comics. He's the first official mutant to appear over at Marvel Comics, and he's surprisingly strong. Not only that, but he also rules an entire underwater kingdom, so yeah, like I said, a pretty powerful guy, but none of that is enough to protect him from Thor's wrath or his fists. Despite many more well-known and often considered to be more powerful characters out there struggling to face Thor, Wonder Man is actually a character who has fared pretty well, despite not being as well loved as some of the others on this list, or as iconic, I would say. Now don't get me wrong, I love Simon, and despite his often lackluster costumes, I do think he deserves more love in the comics. So here we are. Wonder Man was often known for having fists that were actually stronger than Thor's hammers. It was basically a saying people said about Wonder Man, and for a while this was even proven to be true when the two actually came to blows. But what happened? Clearly he can't have always fared well in a fight against Thor if he's on this list, right? Well, Thor eventually used the spinning of his hammer to collect all the energy that Simon was throwing his way and used it to charge up his own hits, swinging right back at Wonder Man with everything he had thrown at Thor, which was how Thor was able to get even and beat Simon in the end. Even though it might seem insane, Thor actually was powerful enough to defeat the Sentry. It's true. Or, I mean, at least kind of. Really, Thor went up against the Sentry's alter ego, the Void, whom Norman Osborn was trying to use for his own means during the siege of Asgard in the Dark Reign days. During, literally, siege. While Void was a villain who once scared pretty much all of the heroes based in New York City, which, let's be real, for Marvel is honestly a lot of them. Here Thor took on alone and even managed to defeat both the Void and Sentry. Though granted, this was at Bob's behest, so kind of having, I think, a little bit of the Sentry's help, at least mentally, to overwhelm the Void. You see, Sentry saw what was happening and he didn't want to be used in this way, so he basically begged Thor to put him out of his misery here and end him. Still, the fact that Thor was able to fight back against the Sentry's dark alter ego, who has been established as being immensely powerful, and was able to seemingly end the Sentry by throwing him into the sun, at least for a time, was pretty impressive. This was less humbling and more of Thor ending his friend in the name of mercy, but at the end of the day, it's an impressive victory, so I felt compelled to share it with you here. I have mixed feelings about this humbling moment, but it did happen, and I do want to have at least one lady on this list. And these two together are often paired up as being iconic since they both boast of lightning powers. So here we go. We are talking about Storm, a leader of the X-Men and at one time Queen of Wakanda. We all love Storm here, and I'm honestly sure Thor would never even think to fight against her normally, but in this instance, he was forced to do so during the 1999 Contest of Champions. Storm seems to be outmatched when it comes to their power sets at first. We have to consider this was also the late 90s before Storm had realized her full potential and was established as a true and official goddess. Thor ends up having her on the ropes here when Storm manages to get up close. It's honestly not a bad tactic considering that I feel like Mjolnir can pack more of a punch at range, and Thor's powers can be even more accurate and deadly in terms of targeting her alone if we got some distance. However, in the end, it isn't Thor's hammer or his fists or powers that defeat her, but instead a much more surprising move, honestly, that disarms her: a kiss. I gotta say, I wasn't expecting that. Thor used the kiss to literally take Storm's breath away, causing her to faint and granting him the W. You might be surprised to hear that Thor is powerful enough to dance with even the wielder of the power cosmic and come out on top. That is exactly what happened when Thor faced off against Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer at the time is soaring through the cosmos when of course he runs into Thor. From there he decides to attack Thor, who at that moment was fighting against Beta Ray Bill. Now if you're wondering what the heck, why are these two fighting when for the most part these two are actually often known to be allies, it had to do with Thor's mental state at that time. He was in the midst of being manipulated basically. He was basically suffering from warrior madness. Bill even attempts to join in on the fight against Thor with Silver Surfer again, but in the end Thor calls on extra power from his own imagined Valkyrie, who represents, like I said, his own warrior's madness, and uses said power to best Silver Surfer, even doing enough damage to completely knock him out. In fact, Silver Surfer may have been doomed if it wasn't for the interference of Adam Warlock here. When Adam Warlock first crossed paths with Thor, he was much less experienced. He had basically just been born and he thought that Lady Sif would make a good mate for him. His mistake, obviously. Thor disagreed. While Adam Warlock is usually known for being one of the most powerful entities in all of Marvel Comics, at the beginning he simply just didn't have the experience or know-how to take on a seasoned and powerful warrior like Thor. So, right off the bat, Thor made quick work of him when he attempted to put the moves on Lady Sif. Not only that, but later on, when Warlock faces Thor again, when he is down with the warrior madness, having come to the rescue of Silver Surfer, he and Norrin both get beat so badly that they are forced to retreat.
We start off our story today in the 2020 volume of Thor, written by Donny Cates, as Thor has become king of Asgard, taking the place of his father, Odin. Thor is about to give a lovely little inaugural speech when out of literally nowhere, the world devourer Galactus comes crashing down onto Asgard, frostbitten and begging for help from the new Allfather. He claims that the Star Plague, the Great Black Winter, is coming. In response to this, Thor does, honestly, the smart thing and calls together a collection of the Heralds of Galactus to figure out what in the damned Helheim a Star Plague is. But it isn't until Galactus' main herald, the Silver Surfer, shows up that we actually get actual answers. Now, Silver Surfer is actually no longer silver here. Following the events of Silver Surfer Black, he is now basically obsidian colored. It's pretty cool, but not important at all to this story. Surfer informs Thor that the Black Winter is essentially the end of everything, and the Black Winter was the cataclysm that ended the previous iteration of the cosmos where Galactus came from before he was Galactus. Galactus eats planets, where the Black Winter eats realities. Despite that though, Galactus survived the Black Winter the first time, and then when he fell to Asgard, it was after surviving the Black Winter again by the skin of his teeth. Surfer is sure that Galactus is the only one who can face the Black Winter, and for that purpose, he has a plan. The Surfer has been aware of 5 unique planets throughout the universe that, if consumed by Galactus, will give him a level of power he has never had before, and that the Surfer had been hiding these planets from his master for a very, very long time, and still continues to hide their exact whereabouts. The Silver Surfer and Thor decide to evacuate these planets of their populations to allow Galactus to feed on them and become powerful enough to face the Black Winter. Before they actually set out though, they seek out Galactus' say on the matter. Galactus then gives us a little bit more information about the Winter. Basically, whenever an individual looks upon Black Winter or Galactus, each individual will perceive them differently, as they are beings of such astronomical importance and power that it's impossible to comprehend what they truly are. But unlike Galactus, when one looks into the Black Winter, they also see their own real, true demise. When Galactus was just Galen and he hadn't experienced the cosmic wonder of being Galactus, he saw nothing but a massive black void of nothingness, as he wasn't meant to pass away yet. But when he escaped this time, he saw one thing. He saw Thor. So, out of nowhere, he begins to instill Thor with the power cosmic in a blinding flash of light, saying that if Thor is to be his end, then together they will face the Black Winter, and when it is done, he wants Thor close so they can have some words. And with that, he turns this already insanely powerful All-Father Thor into the new Herald of Galactus. Kicking off the second issue of the story, we see a world very similar to our own as it begins to succumb to the Black Winter's destruction of its universe, with black snow falling that begins to wipe away everyone and everything it touches. The heroes of this world, a red and blue sun god, a god of emerald light, a god of dark perhaps, a god of the ocean, and a god of speed, they all rush to save their world, passing by a big building with a golden globe on top of it. It's the Justice League. It is totally a reference to DC and the Justice League, but they are all completely helpless to stop the destruction of not just their planet, but as we zoom out, their entire galaxy, their entire universe is being enveloped by the indescribably massive hand of the Black Winter as it consumes that universe. That may be one of my favorite openings to a Marvel comic, but alas, this all takes place in the Eye of Thor, as we see he has arrived at the first of the 5 enchanted planets, Clips, with Galactus in tow. Thor, being the hero we expect, tries to deny Galactus this planet as it is inhabited by an actual civilization, but Galactus is a hungry boy and he won't let a herald talk to him like that, so he attacks Thor, sending him crash landing onto the planet. Unfortunately for Galactus though, Thor is not just his herald, he is the god king of Asgard, and even without the power cosmic, he wields astronomical levels of power, which he proves by sending his hammer straight at Galactus, destroying the Devourer's hand, and then calls it back, doing the same to Galactus' knee. Unfortunately, the denizens of the planet, understandably, not having any idea what the hell is going on, begin to attack Thor. Being distracted with the people of Clips, Thor cannot stop Galactus from beginning his feast. In a last-ditch effort, he sends his ravens Hugin and Munin out to Sif, who has taken the place of Heimdall on Asgard, and she opens the Bifrost up to transport the Clipsians, that's what I'm gonna call them, to Asgard for safety. As Galactus feeds off of the surface energies of the planet, decimating any and all life that presides there, like animals and plants, he grows greedy and hungers for more and more power to the point that he ignores Thor, who had promised to restore life to the planet, and Galactus completely destroys and consumes Clips in an absolutely massive explosion. Now, sufficiently powered up by one of the 5 planets, Galactus makes a move to attack Thor once again, but before he can, he is attacked with a volley of explosive ammunition as Thor is struck across the face and a hammer flies right back into the hands of none other than Beta Ray Bill. Now, Beta Ray Bill is no pushover. When he first showed up after the destruction of his planet at the hands of Galactus, he was worthy of Thor's hammer, and he even defeated the God of Thunder in battle. That was then, and this is now. Thor was just Thor then. Now he is Thor and the King of Asgard and a Herald of Galactus, but Bill believes Thor to be simply corrupted by the World Devourer, and he refuses to back down. Charging at Thor, all it takes is a simple backhand from the God of Thunder to send Bill flying, crash landing on Clips' moon, which is being bombarded by the debris of Clips itself. Now, this fight goes on for a little while, with Thor pretty much just trying to get Bill to chill the heck out, and also fighting off Galactus, who is still trying to say he controls Thor as his herald. Bill will not give up on what he thinks is a corrupted Thor, and their fight is a one-sided slog, up until Thor throws his hammer and Bill catches it, holding on tight to keep Thor from recalling it. So instead, Thor calls Stormbreaker, Bill's hammer, to him, and with it, he lands a massive blow against Bill, who defends with Mjolnir. Now, the attack from Thor shatters Stormbreaker as it hits Mjolnir in a massive blast that knocks Bill down and keeps him there. Unfortunately, Bill has a big old horse mouth, and he keeps opposing Thor. Before Thor can land a final definitive blow, though, he is interrupted by the Bifrost carrying Sif, who stands also opposed to Thor, defending Bill from her own Allfather. In true Sif fashion, she gives Thor a good old earful about how he is being a horse's ass. Now, personally, I think Thor is doing what he thinks is best, allying with Galactus, but almost taking the life of Bill, that is a bit too far. Sif hasn't come to fight Thor, simply to bring Bill back to Asgard under her protection and to yell at Thor. Thor, being all butthurt, throws his hammer, and Sif simply opens the Bifrost, sending the hammer to Jotunheim, leaving Thor speechless. Now, this doesn't matter to the story at all, but the hammer lands at the feet of Loki, who is the current king of Jotunheim, and he actually picks it up before Thor recalls it, of course. Now, while the hammer is flying back to Thor and he just got scolded by Sif, Galactus comes crashing down, being bored of their little argument, and brings the Thunder God back on track, as they need to go to the other 4 planets still before the Black Winter arrives. With this, Sif and Beta Ray Bill head back to Asgard, and Thor calls down a massive bolt of lightning that strikes Galactus in the chest and then strikes Thor, granting him the power cosmic that he just stole from Galactus, which is awesome. They now set off to consume the other planets. The first they arrive at is called Silas, an uninhabitable and minuscule mesoplanet, homeworld of these jellyfish-like aliens. The planet was the former home of a race of long-past war sorcerers, with their burial grounds rich in decomposing enchantments. The second world is Io-X4, which was the homeworld of these really cool bear-like animals gifted with telekinesis and precognition, and because of the latter, they were already ready to evacuate their planet when Thor showed up. The next would be Vanish 4002, which was an ancient supergiant with a semi-sentient core of molten blood, and homeworld of humanoid insect aliens. The semi-sentient core of the planet gave its life freely to aid in the fight against the Black Winter. Now, all 3 of these planets had their inhabitants evacuated to Asgard by Thor before their destruction, which fed into the power of Galactus. The 5th and final planet, however, is known as Cryo. This planet is home to an extremely advanced species who knew of the coming threat, and in response had assembled their armies to aid Thor and Galactus. But that's not how this works. As Thor arrives on the planet and tries to convince its leader to evacuate to Asgard, all of a sudden Galactus begins to devour the planet prematurely because the Black Winter has arrived. As the Black Winter begins to destroy this world, just like it did with the not Justice League planet, Thor rips off a part of his cape to cover his eyes so as to not see his own true demise. As the denizens of the planet perish and as Galactus continues to consume the planet, Thor wields the power cosmic alongside his own Allfather powers and channels it into a massive lightning blast that could shatter entire continents, which he sends into the center of the Black Winter storm. This attack does nothing but by Galactus 14 more seconds to consume the planet, which he does, destroying it like he did the others. As Thor vows vengeance for the people of Cryo, both he and the fully powered Galactus face the Black Winter, mano a dos. As the fight goes on, Galactus and Thor face the Obsidian cosmic death storm, doing what they can, and the Black Winter begins to speak, calling Thor the All-Butcher and the End God, and taunting Thor. With a blast, it removes Thor's blindfold as it also manages to take Galactus out of the fight. Now, with Thor alone, he is unable to stop the Black Winter from entering his mind and soul. Transported to a massive place inside the Black Winter, or maybe inside his own mind, we don't know, Thor is faced by the images of his greatest villains. Gore the God Butcher, the classic Loki, Mangog, Surtur, Apocalypse, Mephisto, a bunch of villains. They're all here, and the Black Winter is using their shapes to pile on Thor until it takes on the shape of the World Serpent, all while taunting Thor with his own passing. On his last legs, Thor channels the rage of the God Kings that came before him, and through Mjolnir, he unleashes the God Blast. Now, Thor knows it will not defeat the Black Winter, but he does at least free both himself and Galactus. Now, the Black Winter manifests itself in the image of a dark version of Thor and starts his villain monologue, because everyone's gotta have one. Though this isn't what you would expect, the Black Winter reveals that Galactus has been lying. The Black Winter is not here to destroy this universe, hinting at an apparently darker fate than that. Instead, he reveals that he's actually here to retrieve his own herald, Galactus himself. It's the reason that Galen was turned into Galactus and was saved from the ending of the previous universe in order to become the herald for the Black Winter and to become his mini-me. Immediately, Galactus combats this and tries to attack, but is swatted away to some barren moon by the Winter. As Galen begins to beg Thor to act, Thor does by calling down lightning on Galactus, telling him to stay down. Thor explains that he is the only thing standing between the Black Winter and Galactus, and that he isn't done with Galactus just yet. Galactus is more powerful than he has ever been, but Thor rightly responds that he allowed Galactus to have that power to steal it. Galactus has played Thor, the God of Thunder, King of Asgard, ruler of the 10 realms, like a pawn. And then Thor takes all the power that Galactus gained from consuming the 5 planets, just as he took the power cosmic before. Then, in the name of all the planets Galactus has destroyed and the ones he still threatens, and for Asgard itself, Thor, with an absolutely massive amount of lightning and power, sentences Galactus to the afterlife. But he is still not done with Galactus. The Black Winter thanks Thor and goes to take Galen and leave this universe, but Thor ain't allowing that. Using all the full might of the power cosmic, the energy of 100,000 devoured worlds, all the power he just took from Galactus, plus all the power he already has, he turns Galactus into an absolutely massive lightning explosion that is felt throughout the universe that reduces Galactus to nothing but his remaining armor and reduces the Black Winter to a single snowflake. It falls slowly into Thor's hand, admitting defeat, and offers him a vision of his true demise. Thor accepts, only to see a vision of Thanos wielding Mjolnir encrusted with the Infinity Gems in his right hand, a black gauntlet weapon with possibly a new Infinity Gem on the other hand, and leading an army of what looks like the Marvel zombies.
Number 10, Throg. Starting the list off light. He might be small, but he's still pretty mighty. Throg wasn't always a frog. In fact, at one point he was a human named Simon Walterson. He ended up getting help from a witch, but after being unable to pay her, found himself transformed into a frog. Don't you hate when that happens? He befriended Thor back when he was also transformed into a frog by his brother Loki. The two teamed up to help a frog king defend against an army of rats. Simon would go on to become his own version of Frog Thor after a piece of Mjolnir was broken off. This tiny piece was wielded by Simon, who decided to become his own version of the hero while in his frog form. As a frog, he goes by the name Puddle Gulp as well. Puddle Gulp. So if you ever see Puddle Gulp or Simon, that's Throg. Hey. Number 9, Thunderstrike. While Eric Masterson isn't more powerful than 616 Thor, he was still pretty powerful in regards to general power. He was considered worthy enough to wield Mjolnir and for a time was merged with Thor, in essence becoming that hero. However, he's probably better known for his time as Thunderstrike, when he wielded an Urukra crafted mace. He was fairly short-lived as a character, but whether he was Thor or Thunderstrike, he had powers similar to other Asgardians while in his transformed state. He was super strong, durable, tough, quick, and had a healing factor. In addition to that, with his Thunderstrike mace, he was also capable of teleportation, possibly on a multiversal level, which I think is pretty powerful. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you are loving our channel, be sure to show some love for us by heading on over to Facebook and giving us a follow over there. Number 8. War Thor. War Thor is the name that Volstagg took when he became Thor. This all went down during the time that Jane Foster was Thor and the usual 616 Thor was simply known by the name of Odinson. Volstagg became War Thor due to him seizing the Mjolnir of an alternate reality, which was unclaimed. This version of the hammer, however, seemed to have some kind of effect on his mind, as it made him, kind of violent and severe in comparison to how Thor would usually act. Probably hence his name, War Thor. After light elf refugees were attacked by fire demons from Muspelheim, he ended up going to Muspelheim itself, actively taking on the whole realm in battle and threatening to wipe out all life there with a massive flood. Jane Foster as Thor was forced to fight against War Thor and eventually managed to ascertain that he was Volstagg, using her friendship with him to calm him down. Number 7. MCU Thor. Thor in the MCU is pretty powerful, although he still seems to be on a journey towards becoming the most powerful he can ever be within this universe. Recently, he grew quite a bit when it came to his power levels, as he was forced to find a new way to harness his power when separated from Mjolnir, which was destroyed by his sister Hela. Hela destroys Mjolnir at the beginning of Thor Ragnarok, forcing Thor to channel the power within himself and earning him the nickname of Sparkle Fingers from the Grandmaster. Since then, Thor lost an eye but managed to protect his people against Hela and the inevitable destruction of Asgard via Ragnarok, using this prophesied end to basically defeat his sister. So although Asgard is destroyed, it lives on in Asgardians. Yay! Thor was unfortunately no match for Thanos in space, although he did actually almost defeat Thanos in Infinity War single-handedly, although yeah, I guess in the end he didn't. However, he did go on to find a home for his people under the leadership of Valkyrie on Earth, creating sort of a new Asgard, if you will. We don't know where he's off to next, but it is possible we could see him take up the mantle of leader from Valkyrie, finally accepting his own fate as the next Allfather and inevitably taking Odin's place. That is after he goes on some adventures with the Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm sure. The Asgardians of the Galaxy? Number 6. Ultimate Thor. Ultimate Thor was an interesting version of the character. He hails from the reality of Earth 1610, and initially we were led to believe that this alternate wasn't actually even Thor, but instead was just a guy who kind of like thought he was Thor and was possibly suffering from delusions, who was named Thorleif Gorman. He had a suit which helped him to fight against his enemies. Over time, it would be revealed that Thorleif Gorman was indeed the latest incarnation of Thor Odinson, as memories came flooding back to him. This version of Thor wasn't as reliant on Mjolnir as some other versions of Thor are, which makes him in some ways more powerful. Also, that suit. Number 5. Jane Foster. Simply known as Thor, and for a time known in terms of her series as Mighty Thor. While we know this version of the character was actually Jane Foster, at first in the comics it actually was a mystery as to who the woman behind the hammer was. Jane Foster became Thor after Thor Odinson was deemed unworthy, with the hammer actually calling out to her. This was also at a time that Jane was sick with cancer, so she had to be strong in many different ways. And it was exceedingly impressive that she decided to remain as Thor, considering the revelation that each time she transformed into the hero, her body was actually cleared of all toxins, including her chemotherapy treatments. Meaning that every time Jane became that hero, she in essence went back to square one with her treatment, making her sicker and sicker over time. Jane even chose to continue being Thor when her life was at stake, and she did end up dying, sacrificing herself to protect the world against Mangog. Fortunately, she would be resurrected by Odin afterward and become known as the hero Valkyrie, which is also like a really big moment for Jane Foster, since Odin, up to that point, never really liked Jane. He was always giving her a hard time. Number 4. Herald of Thunder. This version of Thor folks will be most familiar with, probably from the game Fortnite, but he's actually inspired by Donny Cates' current run on Thor, who exists in main continuity. So even if you're like, Herald of Thunder, that's a Fortnite thing. It's actually also a comics thing. Just like in the comics, Thor is convinced by Galactus to join up with him, as a threat greater than Galactus is apparently on its way, known as the Black Winter. The Black Winter is literally a cosmic sort of, well, winter storm that in essence destroys everything it touches with its snowfall. So, like snow, but if it was like a whiteout for existence instead of just, you know, small frozen bits of water. much worse than snow. In the game Fortnite, Thor agrees to join Galactus in his fight against Black Winter and becomes his Herald of Thunder, becoming imbued with the power cosmic. Number 3. Rune King Thor. Rune King Thor, although often referred to as an alternate version of the character, is actually from the main continuity. He's more like a very distinct period in time in Thor's life, which ends up in essence getting somewhat reset. In other words, he's kind of main continuity, kind of alternate continuity. What makes him so powerful? Well, this is a version of Thor who comes to be because he's facing Ragnarok and looking for a way to stop it. He ends up gaining the power of the Odin Force and rune magic as well. He gains the Odin Force after Odin dies. Again, Odin has died a lot. Then there is a whole tangential reality that ends up being created where this Thor rules Earth, but I guess technically that's also like now an alternate future version of this version of Rune King Thor. So yeah. Oh boy. Anyways, this Rune King Thor would not be able to avoid Ragnarok in the end and would end up being reset as a result of all of the death that was part of that whole colossal event, along with the other gods and goddesses of Asgard. So that's why Thor isn't quite like Rune King Thor right now in the main continuity, despite this version being a part of the main continuity. Because yeah, he like lost both his eyes. So, lost both his eyes, and yet Thor, I think, is back to having both his eyes. He lost both his eyes, then he had his eyes, then he lost an eye. Does he have both of his eyes back now? I don't know. I can't keep track of how many eyes Thor has. Changes all the time. Number 2. All-Father Thor. While many people still say that Rune King Thor is one of the most powerful versions, and he definitely is, I think the real power lies in a potential alternate future version of Thor known as Old King Thor or All-Father Thor, or simply just as King Thor. Any of these names is acceptable and correct. So if you've heard someone say one and you're like, wait, which one is it? It's all, there's like literally 15 to 20 names actually this character goes by, so they're all right. This version of Thor was once believed to be the true future of Thor, but has since been relegated to kind of an alternate future, with him hailing from the possible future of Earth 14412. Although this Thor has alluded to the fact that if 616 Thor was to die, it would actually affect him, so not sure how connected they are still. In this reality, Thor would not only defeat Gore the God Butcher, Galactus, a souped up version of his brother Loki, a souped up version of Doctor Doom, and an even more powerful returning Gore the God Butcher, but he also at one point wielded the Phoenix Force. This all went down after All-Father Thor faced off against Old Man Phoenix, his friend Logan, who had become the host of that force. While Thor lost that fight, the two ended up teaming up together to save Earth from a version of Doom who was super power boosted by various artifacts and powers that he'd been collecting. In the end, Phoenix sacrificed himself to pass on the power of the Force to Thor so that he might stand a chance in defeating Doom, which he ultimately did. Number 1. Herald of None. Herald of None is technically the Thor we have in main continuity currently. This is a period in Thor's life where he basically took all of Galactus' power in order to defeat Black Winter, going from his herald to kind of like renouncing Galactus and ultimately defeating him so that he might destroy the Black Winter, which threatened the existence of everything in the multiverse and the multiverse itself. Doing this allowed Thor to be successful in taking out Black Winter, reducing it to a mere snowflake, one single snowflake. This snowflake also allowed Thor a glimpse into a potential future when it melted on his hand, where he saw Thanos had returned, leading perhaps an army of undead Marvel heroes who were under his influence as he wielded an Infinity Stone encrusted version of Mjolnir. I don't know if we know yet about this future, when it's coming to pass, but I love when comics are like, look at this future, this could happen. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. Give it to me, give me this future.
Coming in at number 10, we've got the time that Thor was left for dead adrift in space, as seen in the MCU film Avengers: Infinity War. Thor has a pretty brutal time during the two most recent Avengers movies, with Infinity War beginning with Thor having to watch both Loki and Heimdall die, and the Hulk be defeated by an intimidating new villain, Thanos. After this smackdown, Thor is left adrift in space with the remnants of the Asgardian refugee ship, something that would likely kill any human hero in the Marvel Universe, and yet Thor is able to survive until he conveniently bumps into the windshield of the Guardians of the Galaxy, showing that, I guess, Asgardians are just really, really good at holding their breath. Coming in at number 9, we have the time Malekith turned Thor's liver into broken glass, a magical punishment that makes me wince just thinking about it. Malekith might get a bad rap for his lackluster portrayal in the film Thor: The Dark World, but in the comics he's been a pain in Thor's side for generations, and in this case, I mean that pretty literally. During an event that saw multiple Thors from different points of his timeline fighting against the Dark Elves, Malekith used his magic to torture a young Thor, and claimed to have turned his liver into a mound of broken glass within his own body. Understandably, this upset Thor, and his response was to spit shards of glass into Malekith's face, which is probably the most badass way possible to respond to some heavy internal bleeding. Coming in at number 8, we have all the times that Thor has wrestled with the Hulk. Whether it's in comic books, animated television shows, or billion-dollar blockbusters, Thor has always been one of the few heroes capable of standing up to the strength of the Incredible Hulk. And this usually puts him into an awkward position whenever the Jade Giant inevitably goes on a rampage. Whether battling on the streets of Earth or the gladiator arenas of the planet Sakaar, Hulk and Thor will likely continue to test their strength against one another for many years to come, if only because Thor is one of the few people that can tank a green punch and keep on swinging. Coming in at number 7, we have the time Thor chose to tear out both of his eyes in pursuit of knowledge. Desperate for a way to prevent the destruction that would be caused by the Asgardian event of Ragnarok, Thor visited the Well of Mimir, where Odin had once given up his eye in exchange for forbidden knowledge. However, Thor was stunned after removing his eye to find that the well still would not fill with water for him, only to slowly realize that since his father had already sacrificed an eye, he would need to up the sacrifice in order to be granted knowledge. Thus, Thor did the extremely metal act of ripping out both of his eyeballs, and despite his now literal blindness, was able to see the proper path forward to save the entire Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 6, we have the multiple occasions that Thor has survived the power of the sun. As an Asgardian that's thousands of years old, Thor's adventures have spanned all across the cosmos, and have led to Thor being put in the most destructive situations possible more often than you'd think. While aiding Adam Warlock and the Infinity Watch, Thor found himself having to withstand the strength of a star going supernova, an explosion that left him dazed and confused in an unknown location, but still undeniably alive and uninjured. Combined with the times that Thor has shrugged off attacks that have claimed to be as powerful as multiple exploding suns, and the God of Thunder really has an impressive survival resume. Coming in at number 5, we have the Norse event of Ragnarok. An ancient prophecy spelling both doom and rebirth for every living being in Asgard, the concept of Ragnarok has been used for multiple events throughout Thor's lifetime, and even adapted into one of the best MCU films. In the comics, however, Thor spent many years attempting to prevent Ragnarok, and when Asgard was finally fated to be destroyed, Thor defied the gods who had created the Asgardians and destroyed the World Tree, ending the constant cycle of Ragnarok and relocating Asgard to float directly above the state of Oklahoma. Definitely an odd way to end a story about the end of the universe, but hey, at least Thor's still alive. Coming in at number 4, we have the time Thor was destroyed by, who else? The Destroyer. During the big relaunch of Thor's self-titled series during the late 90s, Thor once again had to face off against one of his earliest foes, the Destroyer, as it relentlessly attacked the rest of the Avengers. In a stunning twist for a first issue of a new series, Thor was actually killed by this version of the Destroyer and sent to the realm of Hell, where Thor had to bargain and fight his way out of his imprisonment to return to Earth and save the rest of the Avengers. Does it still count as survival if you actually did die, you just don't stay in the afterlife though? Who knows at this point in the Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 3, we have the time Thor was turned to glass and then shattered by Thanos. In the MCU films, Thor and Thanos built up quite the intense and personal rivalry over just a couple films, but their confrontation in the comics version of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline somehow managed to knock the God of Thunder even lower. Thanos' reality-warping powers were put to use during his final battle, and just when Thor seemed ready to bring his hammer down on Thanos' head, the God of Thunder was turned to glass and then shattered, a humiliating defeat against a villain who, at this point, had complete control of the laws of the universe. Better luck next team-up event, Thor. Coming in at number 2, we have Thor surviving 3 direct attacks from the celestial Arishem. If you've seen Marvel's Eternals in the past year, you know just how huge Arishem is, and with Celestials being some of the most powerful beings throughout the entire Marvel Universe, they are not creatures you want to mess with. However, after believing Arishem had killed his father Odin, Thor relentlessly attacked the Celestial with his hammer, refusing to back down even as Arishem brought his full strength down on him, finally claiming defeat by throwing the Celestial's own magical sword through his chest, even if by the end of this fight, Thor looked like his entire costume had been put through a shredder. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the time Thor survived the torture of the God Butcher for over 2 weeks. Gore the God Butcher has been one of Thor's biggest foes for the last decade of comics, and this year we'll finally get to see the villain on screen portrayed by Christian Bale in the MCU film Thor: Love and Thunder. In the comics, Gore is attempting to murder every deity across the Marvel Universe, and after capturing a young Thor, boasts that even gods of torture can only last moments under his interrogation techniques. Amazingly, Thor held out against Gore's torture for 17 days, before finally being able to free himself due to the arrival of his Viking allies. This scenario would scar Thor physically and mentally for many ages to come, but being able to survive the God Butcher for such a long time is something Thor should be truly proud of.
Coming in at number 10, the God Blast. Because Thor's life force is now intertwined with his hammer by way of Doctor Strange, he can now have access to a whole host of exciting new powers. Thor's hammer Mjolnir has been used countless times throughout his history as an Avenger, and it truly lives up to the saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Let's give you a little example. Roll it. The God Blast is actually exactly what it sounds like. It's a blinding blast of force that completely eliminates everything in its path, leaving behind absolute destruction. Not even an immortal can withstand his power. And number 9, transformation. We all remember the moment that a hot-headed Thor was sent back to Earth by his father Odin in order to teach him a lesson in humility. What we didn't know is that in the original comics, when he was sent back to Earth, he had absolutely no recollection of Asgard or his powers. He then assumes the identity of a Donald Blake, a Harvard med student with kind of like a crippled leg, and after opening his own private practice in New York, he receives a thought from his father to travel to Norway where an alien attack was going to take place. This is crazy. After the aliens attacked, he made his way into a cave for safety, where he came across this cane, and in a fit of rage he slams the cane down, which transforms into Thor's hammer, which restores him of his powers and then opens up a whole new world where now he has this alter ego. So now he can literally go back and forth from Thor, the god of thunder, into Donald Blake, allowing him to blend in safely on his new home planet of Earth. So at number 8, translation. Being the ruler and protector of the 9 realms is incredibly difficult, and on top of that, Thor needs to be able to communicate with everyone that he comes across. On Earth alone, we have around 6,500 languages, with about 2,000 of those languages only being spoken by less than 1,000 people. Now imagine the sheer volume of languages and dialects the universe would have on top of that. The All-Tongue or All-Speak is an ability that allows him to be heard by anyone in their native language. In the Marvel Universe, we don't really get a chance to see this used because the directors believed it would be easier for audiences to follow along in just English. Number 7, healing. Now, as I mentioned before, Thor is bound to his hammer. This can be good and bad. It's great in the sense that he can call on it whenever he wants, and it definitely adds new powers to his already strong arsenal. However, it can be really damaging if his hammer is, well, damaged. The two share a life force, so while Thor may appear superhuman, he's still vulnerable. That being said, Thor has a similar ability to that of Wolverine and Deadpool. While he's not able to regrow limbs like Deadpool, he can however heal burns and broken bones at a slightly slower speed than Wolverine does. That's all well and good for his physical body, but what about his powers? Well, I have some shocking news. His powers are not unlimited, and they require time to refuel, if you will. That's why Thor had Odin's metalsmith create him a casket that puts him in a coma-like state to quickly replenish his powers. Number 6, teleportation. Now, I've never been a really big fan of long processes of commuting to work or traveling to see family. Sometimes I just dream about how cool it would be to just step into a machine that would take you anywhere you wanted to go. Of course, after they worked out all the kinks. You know, I'm not gonna risk traveling through time and space to only have my arms sticking out of my torso because the scientists skipped a step. We don't really get to see this ability in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it would have rendered a lot of important plot lines such as the Space Stone and the damaged Rainbow Bridge and his lack of attention to Jane Foster completely useless. In the comics though, Thor displays the ability to use his hammer to open up an interdimensional portal in his search for Loki, as seen here in the comic strip. Number 5. Mind resistance. We all know that Thor has the incredible ability to control his hammer with simply his mental abilities, but what we didn't know was that he has a remarkable ability to fight off mind control. Thor has displayed this ability to fend off some of the universe's most powerful mental attacks, ranging from defying his own father, Loki's spells, a mental attack from Glory, and has even resisted the power of the Eye of Horus. Thor's mind resistance is strong, but not impenetrable. In the version of Marvel's Earth, his magic powers will trump that of a mutant, but not necessarily a cosmic entity. Number 4. Thick skin. Not thick skin in the sense of being able to take a joke, but in a literal sense. Thor literally has thick skin. He has this godlike ability to take punishment from even Earth's greatest mutants. Thor's skin and bones are about as dense as you would imagine a god's would be. I mean, that's why he's able to be thrown like a ragdoll by the Hulk, or take the kind of physical abuse that would leave a normal human 6 feet deep. Number 3. Magic. Even though in the Marvel Cinematic Universe we mostly see characters such as Doctor Strange and Loki displaying magic, Thor has also a few tricks up his sleeves. Now I'm not talking about pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Thor was raised and trained in Asgard, which has produced a number of beings with mystic forces, and as a result of growing up in this environment, Thor basically has a natural understanding of how magic works. We have seen a few examples of this, from knowing about the Pool of Visions in the cave, when he gave life to Vision after implanting the Mind Stone, and even in Ragnarok when he gained the ability to unlimited supply of mystical powers after acquiring the knowledge and use of the runes. Number 2. Weather control. We all remember that huge swirl of clouds and lightning that Thor can produce simply by swinging his hammer around, but he also has the ability to control the weather. Well, mainly the kind of weather that makes you wish you brought an umbrella. His ability to draw clouds with a chance of rain at any moment would leave even the greatest meteorologists in absolute marvel. See what I did there? Not only can he control the weather on Earth, but this power has also been used even on his home planet of Asgard, where he confronted Hela on the Rainbow Bridge. Now, last but not least, we bring you the number 1 power you never knew Thor had: longevity. Now, we're not saying that Thor is immortal, but what we are saying is that the average Asgardian lifespan is much longer than that of a human on Earth. He is in no way immortal, but he has lived for eons upon eons, with a human's life only being a blink in his existence. We're not too sure how old Thor is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but when he arrives on Earth, judging by his actions of disobeying his father and having the odd temper tantrum, we can only assume that he's relatively young for an Asgardian. No offense to those angsty teens out there watching, of course. You do you. Okay.
At number 10, he's a god. I think this is something that a decent amount of people forget. Thor is literally the god of thunder. Like, yeah, he's a demigod technically, but he's still a freaking god. And this comes with a whole bunch of associated powers, like Superman toughness, senses, strength, and the fact that he's 1,500 years old. Yeah, that's also a thing. He's normally depicted as being 1,500 and 1,800 years old, which makes me really question the ethics and morals behind Thor and Jane's love triangle thing. Like, at what age does an Asgardian become legal, or is that just like whenever their body decides to grow? Because again, they're gods. As deities, this aspect is inherent to their existence, granting Thor self-sufficiency and rendering him immune to the same necessities for aging as humans. So while Odin serves as an example of aging among gods, Thor is always looking good, so I doubt he'll get old anytime soon. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support us by giving this video a like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is Super Breath. Introduced and seemingly only used in Journey into Mystery number 86 from back in 1962, Thor has the ability to blow really hard. Okay, wait, let me rephrase that. He will blow you to kingdom come. No, that's even worse. There's no good way to say it. Well, what I mean is that Thor's god lungs are so powerful, he could actually cause a hurricane with an exhale. In the comic in question, a villain known as Zarko tries to shoot Thor with a pew-pew that would send him to another dimension, but to stop this from happening, Thor uses his super breath, which is described as a hurricane force to get out of it. No idea how breath can save you from entering the fourth dimension, but hey, all bets are off with this one because it was only used once, and of course, in the comics. There will never be an explanation that makes sense. At number 8 is super speed. Thor, a deity wielding the mighty Mjolnir, possesses astonishing speeds in his arsenal. He isn't just renowned for his immense strength within the Marvel universe, but also his extraordinary swiftness, surpassing even the speed of light. This remarkable velocity enables Thor to outpace Quicksilver, a prominent speedster among the X-Men, essentially Marvel's answer to the Flash. While an exact measurement of Thor's velocity remains elusive, he has indicated that on Earth his speed is supersonic, yet when traveling in space he can circumnavigate the sun and span the universe in mere seconds, feat made possible by Mjolnir's ability to transcend time and space. Indeed, Thor's exploits include even freaking time travel. At number 7 is All Tongue. While this might sound like something you'd see on a Toronto guy's Tinder profile, it isn't exactly what you think. An Asgardian deity responsible for safeguarding the 9 realms, Thor's duty often requires interactions with vastly diverse races, many of which communicate in distinct languages. And although filmmakers tend to simplify matters by having everybody speak English for audience interpretation, the comic version of Thor possesses the remarkable ability to converse fluently in the language of all 9 realms. He can actually choose which language to use during a conversation. This remarkable skill is known as the All Tongue, a gift that ensures whoever communicates with him will hear his words in their native tongue, allowing for seamless understanding. So basically, Thor can talk in whatever language he wants, and everyone he's talking to is able to understand him. Like a live-in-the-moment translator that actually gets the grammar right instead of just being a literal word-for-word translation. At number 6 is Warrior's Madness. Comic books and movies have depicted numerous instances where heroes find themselves facing superior and overwhelming forces in battles. Tactics they employ to survive against insurmountable odds and achieve victory can be attributed to a range of factors, and among these heroes, Thor stands out as someone who's endowed with such an ability which, if harnessed, has the potential to significantly impact not only his adversaries but also all those close to him. When he's in a pinch, Thor can call upon the Warrior's Madness. The Warrior's Madness, also referred to as Sin Unpardonable, stands as Asgard's most forbidden affliction under Odin's decree. Those afflicted bear the weight of a dire penalty, with only the most solemn sacrifices capable of redemption. This malady grants Thor a tenfold surge in strength and endurance, yet perilously endangers his mental well-being. It manifests through symptoms such as berserker fury, intense migraines, erratic thoughts, savage and animalistic actions, uncontrollable behavior, and irrationality. At number 5 is Earthbending. During the early 2000s, a series of intricate events led to numerous Asgardians becoming trapped within the bodies of ordinary humans. This continued until Thor emerged from his prolonged slumber, breaking the cycle of Ragnarok and establishing a new Asgard above Oklahoma. Thor's return marked a rebirth, unveiling his extraordinary power over Earth itself, elevating him to one of the mightiest Asgardian deities. Embracing his elder god lineage, Thor's abilities expanded beyond mere weather manipulation. He gained dominion over vast chasms spanning continents and trigger earthquakes. In moments requiring more than weaponry and brawn, the creation of chasms to separate Thor from his adversaries proved to be an essential strategy. At number 4 is Teleportation. In 2000, Marvel introduced the Ultimate Marvel Universe as a way to refresh long-standing characters with new variations and minor reboots. On Earth 1610, many of Marvel's iconic figures underwent an updated and reimagined depictions, including Thor, who exhibits a distinct divergence. In this rendition, Thor's reliance on Mjolnir for his abilities is diminished, showcasing a more arrogant and resilient warrior. Unlike his traditional counterpart, Thor from 1610's powers are not solely derived from Mjolnir. Rather, they're channeled through the enchanted hammer, resulting in a significant reduction of his power level within the Ultimate Universe. However, this drawback is balanced by his new form ability to teleport through rune magic. Reports suggest that he can traverse vast distances, spanning cosmic expanses and bridging dimensions. Despite these unique traits, the full scope of Thor's capabilities in this universe remains a mystery. At number 3 is Anti-Force. Beyond its association with potent lightning bolts, Mjolnir possesses a versatile range of abilities. Among these, it can harness and manipulate diverse energies, unleashing multitude of formidable blasts. The Anti-Force stands as one of the most formidable, albeit used sparingly, in a weapon of last resort against adversaries who defy conventional defeat. The Anti-Force's immense destructive energies are inherently pervious, capable of obliterating entire planets. Thor can now create, shape, and manipulate anti or negative forces, which work in different ways depending on the force. Anti-gravity, for example, would repel objects instead of retract. Anti-electromagnetism would cause like charges to attract and opposite charges to repel. Anti-friction and anti-velocity would speed up objects or flow instead of resisting them. Anti-strong force would cause nuclei to explode, and the anti-weak force would cause radioactive growth instead of radioactive decay. Pretty weird. At number 2 is the Odin Force. On various occasions, Thor has been granted the Mighty of Odin Force, an infusion of the cosmic and mystical energies from the realm of Asgard by his father. This divine inheritance amplifies all of his abilities, amalgamating Odin's, Vili's, V's, and his own powers, thus significantly elevating Thor's prowess. Demonstrating this augmented might, Thor managed to fracture Captain America's shield with a single blow, relocated Asgard above New York City's skies, and contained a nuclear missile's explosion. The extent of Thor's achievements while wielding this power was considered just a fraction of its potential, as per the Avatar of Odin Force. As Mjolnir suffered the damage during a confrontation with Bor, Thor sought the assistance of Stephen Strange for its repair, and to mend the hammer, Strange revealed that Thor would need to invest his remaining Odin Force and permanently bind the essence with the hammer. Despite the risk, Thor willingly underwent ancient ritual performed by Doctor Strange, channeling the Odin Force back into Mjolnir and restoring its integrity. Becoming the Allfather of Asgard after the War of the Realms, Thor once again bequeathed the mighty Odin Force, with Odin's ultimate sacrifice granting him access to its full potential. At number 1 is the Celestial Chef. Jarnbjorn, a dwarven forged battle axe crafted from Asgardian steel for Runa, an original Valkyrie member, became significant as she vanished, absorbed by the headless Celestial. Stored in Asgard's arsenal, the weapon was later wielded by Thor before he possessed Mjolnir. In the 9th century, struggling to lift Mjolnir, Thor utilized Jarnbjorn as his primary tool against various earthbound adversaries such as frost giants, trolls, and dragons. During the 11th century, Thor empowered the axe with his blood to permeate celestial armor, confronting Apocalypse. However, Thor eventually lost Jarnbjorn, which was later claimed by Kang the Conqueror from Baron Mordor's tomb. The Apocalypse twins, Uriel and Eamon, took the axe from Kang and employed it to slay a celestial gardener, becoming the new Apocalypse and orchestrating a plot to incriminate Earth for its demise. The twins manipulated Scarlet Witch to save mutants while humanity faced destruction, leading to the transportation of all mutants to their Ark, leaving Earth and its inhabitants behind.